On today's video, I'm going to discuss some recent research that was published just a couple of months ago, and it's suggesting that the Epstein-Barr virus triggers multiple sclerosis. I'm going to discuss the findings in the study and also how this might impact how multiple sclerosis is going to be treated in the future. And I'm going to share with you some real solutions for right now. So if you haven't met me, my name is Pam Bartha, and if you enjoy these types of educational videos and just giving you solutions on how to take back your health right now, make sure to like and subscribe to this video and share it with others so you can help us get the word out. All right, so I'm just looking here. There's a little notification that I'm not used to. Okay, so let's just carry on with this study. I've got a couple of slides. So what I would like to do first is to share with you the findings, because when you look at how this was published all over like Forbes and so many different media outlets, it really sounded like that this study has really proved that the consensus, the scientific consensus now is that the Epstein-Barr virus triggers multiple sclerosis. And so I want to help you to kind of get down to the Coles notes of what this study really showed. And then that way you can really decide for yourself if you feel that this study is really helpful or not. Let's go over to my slides. I made a couple of slides for you to make it so that you can, I have to figure out where to move myself so I'm out of the way here. There we go. So this study is called, just have to move this over a little bit. There we go. Oops, nope, can't do that. So let me see, how can I do this? I can't read through the longitudinal analysis reveals high prevalence of Epstein-Barr virus associated with multiple sclerosis. So this study was published in January, I believe, 2022, and it got a lot of attention in the MS community. So in the study, they looked at a large group of active people that were in the military. And the average age, they were quite young, like around 20 years old. But they followed them they were able to follow them for 20 years, for about 20 years. So the reason they picked this group is that these people in the military that were active, they would regularly draw blood from them and test them for various things, like, for example, HIV, but also for Epstein-Barr virus, etc. So out of this very large group of people in the military, they looked for people that on their very first blood test that they showed that they were negative to the Epstein-Barr virus. So it was 5.3% of the 10 million. So that would equal about 530,000 people that were negative on the first blood draw. So like they did a blood test, their first blood test, and it was negative for Epstein-Barr. So that means they had not been exposed to the Epstein-Barr virus. And then when you go from there, so they had that big pool because they wanted to start off with people that did not have Epstein-Barr virus. And so out of that group, they found that there were 801 people that eventually developed multiple sclerosis. But those 801, actually there were 955 out of that 10 million person group that developed multiple sclerosis. But what they did is they just picked the people that developed MS that originally they were not infected with the Epstein-Barr virus. So early on, they didn't have MS and they were negative for Epstein-Barr virus on their first sample. And then in research, they always have to have control. So people that were part of this group that also tested negative for Epstein-Barr virus at the start, like the first sample of blood drawn, but they knew that those people never got MS in the 20-year period. So those would be the control. So you've got a group of people, both groups were Epstein-Barr virus negative when they had their first sample, their first blood test done. But 801 of them did develop MS over the 20-year period, where the 1,566 did not. So they just pulled that smaller number out of the larger 530,000 people in that group that were all negative at the onset of the study. So now this is interesting. Now from the group of 801 people that were Epstein-Barr virus negative, so they never had the virus at the start, but they did develop MS, they only picked 35 people out of that whole group to do the study. And so to me, that's a red flag already. I'm like, why did you only pick, why did you work with such a small sample size? Really, really important. And then if you look at the controls, then out of the 1,566 people that were negative, so they never had Epstein-Barr virus at the start of the study or at the start of their first blood sample that was drawn, and they never got MS. So they only picked 107 controls. So what I have seen with a lot of the promotions of this study is that people are not reading the study and they're saying, yeah, there's this big cohort of over 10 million people. They did this very large study and they found that MS is the trigger. It's a scientific consensus. And I'm like, what? A scientific consensus? So they only looked at 35 people out of the 801, or actually there's 955 total so some of them were Epstein-Barr virus positive, so they didn't use them. They only used the ones that were Epstein-Barr negative at the first blood sample that was drawn. But even so, why wouldn't they have used the 801 or something higher? And I didn't really see anything that would suggest. So then to me, that is like, could there be a potential for biases here? Like why only 35 out of 801 that developed MS? And so this is a very small study, a very, very small study. And that's really important. And when you have very small studies, then you don't really know if you have accurate information. So they found that, so at the first, so when they drew the first blood sample from these people, these 35 people in this large group that didn't have MS at the start, but 34 of them did develop they were Epstein-Barr negative at the start, and then they became Epstein-Barr positive. So 34 out of 35. And so these people developed MS, but they also had the Epstein-Barr virus before the MS onset. So one person got MS and then Epstein-Barr virus, but the other ones had Epstein-Barr virus and then later got MS. So then if the controls, so these are controls that were Epstein-Barr negative at the start, and only 61 out of the 107 became Epstein-Barr positive. So the conversion, like on the MS end, was 97%. And on the control end was like going from Epstein-Barr negative to Epstein-Barr positive was 57%, which is lower than the general population. So what is Epstein-Barr virus? So Epstein-Barr virus is a virus from the herpes family. It's extremely common. It's found all over the world. Young kids get it. It's usually asymptomatic. Teens can get it. You may have heard of mononucleosis. You might have heard of mono. So very small numbers of teens will get the actual mono. A lot of people just fight it off. And it's estimated that the Epstein-Barr virus is in at least 95% of the general population. So almost everyone gets Epstein-Barr, and usually it's early on. It's usually not, like it's called the kissing disease, for example, and it's spread through saliva and kids share drinks, etc. So it kind of gets around when we're young. And with MS, it's usually, like mid-20s to 30s. For a lot of people, that can be the onset. It can be later too. But so a lot of people would have Epstein-Barr before MS, they would get Epstein-Barr earlier. So just remember that the general population, there's at least a 95% prevalence, meaning that virtually everyone in the general population has gotten Epstein-Barr virus. So that's really important to remember. So when I see this 100% of people that have MS had Epstein-Barr virus before the MS, like here it's only 97%, like the one person that it was the reverse. They got MS and then later they had antibodies to Epstein-Barr virus. So that's pretty consistent with the general population, 95%, 97%. It's not that big of a stretch. It's not a huge life-altering, difference for sure. So it's very important to understand that. And a lot of people are not reading the science. It's actually a kind of a confusing scientific study to read. So again, looking at their findings, this is a very, very small sample size, 35 people that developed MS, and they had the Epstein-Barr virus before, and 31 of them had Epstein-Barr before, and the one did not, versus 107. So it's a very small sample size. It doesn't prove anything. And the other thing too is that when you look at what these groups were made up of, the study group was 67% males and 32% females. But in real life, most people that get MS are females, about 70% of people that get multiple sclerosis. So that's normal. So approximately 70%, where in the study there were only 32.7% female. So that's not a real life group of people. And I'm going to go to the next slide right now, where we're really looking at causation versus association. There's a big difference between something causing MS and something being associated with MS. So for example, or triggering MS. So it would be something like ice cream and sunburns. So sunburns or ice cream doesn't cause sunburns, but people that are eating ice cream very often, it's in the summertime and it's hotter and there's more sunshine. So ice cream could be associated with sunburns, but that doesn't mean that ice cream causes sunburns. So I'm going to go to the next slide here. Just have to move over here for a sec. All right. So again, 95% of adults have been infected with Epstein-Barr virus. So this is the general population. Virtually everyone's had Epstein-Barr virus when they become an adult, and it lives inside of us most of our lives. And I mentioned already that the young people, they can get it and they may not even notice. They could be asymptomatic, and sometimes teenagers can get mononucleosis. So that's not normally everyone, but it's what we find is that if you're having extreme dysbiosis or severe dysbiosis, you're really out of balance with your microbes, then you're more susceptible to having a more active virus where you have more symptoms. You're so welcome, Autumn, that I'm reviewing this. I'm so glad to review this. So, does Epstein-Barr virus trigger multiple sclerosis? So we have to look at causation versus association. Just like, if you eat ice cream doesn't mean you're going to get a sunburn, but ice cream and sunburns are associated, but that doesn't mean that ice cream causes sunburns. So with causation, I'm just going to pull up another thing here. So with causation, to show causation, you always have to have the Epstein-Barr virus before getting MS, before the onset of multiple sclerosis. So you always have, if it really is a trigger, and they do say, like the researchers do say that, well, it's one of the triggers, and actually some of the other factors could be obesity, low vitamin D, and smoking, and childhood obesity, smoking, and also genetics. But if something causes, for example, if the Epstein-Barr virus causes MS, you always have to have Epstein-Barr virus before the multiple sclerosis. And even in this study, with a very, very small sample size of 35 people, only 34 of them out of 35, and that works out to about 97%. So pretty close to what we see in the general population. And again, it's a small study, so we can't really make any conclusions serious, but it's consistent with what we find in the general population. Some people say that even higher amounts than 95% of the population have Epstein-Barr, more than 95%. So that is out the door at this point. So I'm not saying that Epstein-Barr virus can't make us more susceptible to MS. I'm just saying this study is weak. And I'm not saying that viruses are never involved. I'm saying that this study is very weak and it's not helping us to get to the solution, and we need a solution. We can't wait for years and years for a vaccine or for antiviral treatments or for different immunosuppressive drugs. We need solutions now, not in a few years. We've waited long enough. I was diagnosed over 30 years ago, and that's a long time to wait. And many of you have been waiting for years. So let's get back to the points here. I just want to make sure I'm on the right thing here. Let's see. Where are you? There we are. Perfect. So number one, in order that Epstein-Barr virus would cause the multiple sclerosis, it always has to occur before somebody gets MS. And then the second one is, to prove causation, you have to eliminate confounding factors. We talked about the ones that the standard of care recognize as confounding factors, like low vitamin D, childhood obesity, smoking, genetics, etc. But there is a large and growing body of research that shows that the real confounding factor is being in a state of dysbiosis, meaning that we're really out of balance, meaning that we have far too many disease-causing microbes in our body and not enough health-promoting microbes. So we have parasites, we might have big roundworms, we might have small roundworms, we might have small or flatworms, which are flukes. We might have single-cell parasites, which are protists. And I share a lot of research with all of these different infections, and I've done lots of videos on them. And we have fungal infections, and we also have bad bacterial. And yes, viruses could be active at that point, absolutely. But viruses are the smallest microbes. So if we have a healthy, strong immune system, we're not the ones that get mono, we're not the ones that get really bad flus. But when our immune system is really struggling because we're in this state of dysbiosis, severe dysbiosis, really out of balance, parasitic infestation, then yeah, viruses could be more active. And actually in this study, they found that people with MS, that they could have higher antibodies against the Epstein-Barr virus. So sure, you have a lot of other infections, your immune system is compromised, you might be the one that got mono, right? Because your immune system couldn't fight off the virus well enough because it's dealing with so many other infections. So the confounding factors, and this is what I find really frustrating, is that this study, although it came out of Harvard and it's a really great research institute and a great, well-respected group of researchers, why are we not collaborating together? So there are lots of studies coming out showing that multiple sclerosis, the patients that have MS, that they're dealing with significant or severe dysbiosis. So why are we just picking on one little thing, the smallest, and we're not collaborating together, we're not working together, and we're not seeing how viruses could be a problem if we are in a state of dysbiosis, etc. So the confounding factors that they recognize as confounding factors, again, those are associations. So people that are in childhood, I wasn't obese and I got MS, so I'm not sure how significant that is, but smoking and and also again with vitamin D, low vitamin D, they find that with people with chronic disease, like you can have siblings that have roughly the same amount of sun exposure, and some are deficient in vitamin D and some aren't. And so sometimes these infections make us deficient in vitamin D. So that can be the confounding factor again. So that is number two. And number three is that we have to eliminate reversal causation. So in order to prove that Epstein-Barr virus causes MS, we have to say that it's not possible to get MS before Epstein-Barr virus. Well, actually one person in that study did. And then also, if you think back, remember I said there were 955 people out of the 10 million that developed MS. Why didn't they use those other, but they only used 801. So why did they not use the 955 people that were some of them Epstein-Barr positive? Or sorry, they didn't have Epstein-Barr? Sorry, they were positive for Epstein-Barr. So like the thing is here that you always have to have Epstein-Barr before MS. And if you have MS before Epstein-Barr, that would not work. So you have to eliminate the reversal causation. So they don't know what causes MS. How do they know that people aren't working on it for years before they get the official diagnosis? So for example, if multiple sclerosis is caused by these chronic infections, and they're building and building and building in their body over years, like for myself, then how can we be certain that the MS, the process of this dysbiosis, what if MS is just severe dysbiosis, right? And multiple infections are involved. It's not always the same infections. So then it could actually be that the multiple sclerosis was brewing in the back and making us more susceptible to the viruses. So that is point number three. And the fourth one is the problem, because that's going to take years and years. So to prove that Epstein-Barr causes MS or really triggers, then you've got to prevent people from getting Epstein-Barr to see if every single person that you've prevented from getting Epstein-Barr doesn't get multiple sclerosis. So what does that mean? That means that we've got to develop vaccines for the Epstein-Barr virus, and then we have to give it to healthy people that might possibly get MS. How do we know if they're going to get MS? Because they don't know what causes MS. Maybe a parent that has MS might have their child getting the vaccine. How can you prove, right? It would take large thousands of people in studies to really prove that getting a vaccine that prevents you from getting Epstein-Barr virus would prevent MS. That is like, to me, that's like pie in the sky, right? And that is something that's not going to help us right now. That's not going to help us for a very long time. Then there's talking about antivirals for you giving people that have MS, giving them antivirals. And again, in my experience, in my own humble experience of recovering from MS and also working with at least 1,000 people that in helping them to recover from MS, is that is not going to make much of a difference at all. Why do I say that? Because, for example, eating low carb, following the Live Disease-Free diet, within a week's time, we start to notice significant, or maybe 2 weeks maximum, because it takes a little bit of time to learn it. But we see that people really start to have symptom improvements in as little as 1.5 to 2 weeks. Viruses are not living. They don't eat food. They don't need food. What we're told is that a virus gets into our cells and it injects its genetic material into the nucleus, and it gets our cells to make new viral particles, and then the cells burst and then releases more viral particles. So if Epstein-Barr, other than suppressing the immune system, but again, people that have multiple sclerosis, according to research that is really current right now, and I've shared some and I'm going to continue to share more and more studies, it's that they have large worms, they have small worms, they have protists, single cell parasites, they have fungus, they have Lyme disease very often, Borrelia and the co-infections of Lyme disease. And so we're picking on this one tiny little viral, one species of a virus, and you wonder why. Why are they honing in on such a small study with such a small sample? And what is the purpose? Like what is, a lot of people say, now what? What is the purpose of all of this? To tell us that it's going to take years to get treatment? Well, if you research, and I have another video that I'll be releasing, is that if you go on the MS website, MS Society website, and you go under, just do a search for MS and Epstein-Barr virus, you'll see that the National MS Society has invested money in this type of research, and they're all really hopeful for the vaccine. So, and then interestingly, right after this research was published, Moderna has created a messenger RNA vaccine that they're studying right now for multiple sclerosis, and I don't know how long they're going to take to make sure it's safe. And I will, just so you know, I'm going to be pulling this video off of the social media just so I don't end up getting censored. So I will put it up on my website, but the stuff I'm talking about right now is stuff that just gets people wiped off the social media platforms. So there is this whole industry of, possibly antivirals, possibly more. They talk about in this research about how, these viruses could infect the B cells, and so the B cells could be turning on our nerves, and so we can continue to look for more disease-modifying drugs to kind of destroy these B cells. We need our B cells. They actually defend us against infection. One of the adverse effects of wiping out your B cells is infection. And when we have chronic disease, we're already dealing with multiple infections. We have severe dysbiosis. That's not the answer. Waiting for years and years, especially if we have MS already, the vaccines aren't really going to help us. That's to prevent getting Epstein-Barr. And if Epstein-Barr is a trigger, that's out the window for us too. And then antivirals, I study under a lot of doctors, and one of the doctors is Dr. Klinghardt, and he shared about retroviruses. So sometimes when we get vaccinations, they could be contaminated with retroviruses, and if we're dealing with those, then somehow they could possibly be suppressing our immune system. So there is a small possibility that maybe there are certain viruses that through whatever, vaccines, I think those would be really the only things that could really introduce viruses especially into our DNA. But if we have certain viruses, maybe they could make us more immune suppressed. We know HIV does, and I'm not going to talk about a bunch of research. I'm going to have to go somewhere else with that. But there's a growing number of people that are testing positive for HIV, or they're showing signs of immune suppression, severe immune suppression. So and that's what the HIV is. It's really causing people to have an immune system that can't fight things. So then we would be more susceptible to different types of infections. What we see in our students that have chronic disease and MS, what's more than that is really that there's a history of antibiotic overuse. And so with the antibiotic overuse, that really destroys our natural defense. And then we have a lot of bad microbes that take over, the ones I all shared already, the worms, big and small, roundworms, flatworms, protists, bacteria, bad bacteria, and fungi. And so it's really, whether we were on antibiotics for UTIs, whether it's tonsillitis, bronchitis, acne. I was on months of acne antibiotics, and that, I believe, is what really, really destroyed my natural defense and made me more susceptible to these infections, more so than a virus. So that's the problem, is that this study has been, I'm very disappointed. I'm not saying that viruses can never have any impact. Possibly they could, but the research is not strong enough to say anything about that. And they shouldn't be saying 10 million, a very large study, when they're looking at 35 people that developed MS, and 34 of them out of 35 had Epstein-Barr before the MS. That's a very small study. And so so I'd really like to know what you think about all of this. Do you feel that this is really helpful? Do you feel that this is more of the same of what we've been dealing with for years and years and years in the MS research and MS solutions? I personally feel that it's more of the same. And I am just really disappointed that this is getting so much publicity and again, that's because there are certain things in the pipeline which I really don't believe are going to make a big difference. And again, all of the treatments that we have right now are really not making a difference for people with MS. I work with them every day. They're on these disease-modifying drugs, and they're still becoming more disabled. So what do you think? Do you feel are you disappointed? Do you feel that this is a real wonderful thing? Remember that viruses are not living. You don't have to change your diet with a virus. Sure, you want to get nutrition, but you're not going to notice significant changes in neurological symptoms if you decrease your carbs, if the virus is the big trigger, or even just obesity, etc. Like we can notice, like when our students are following the diet and getting the carbs down to between 35 to 40 total grams of carbs, they're noticing things like the MS hug goes away. Some people notice spasticity decreases dramatically, and sometimes balance starts to improve. Their bladder within a week's time can really, really improve. And then they're sleeping, their brain fog starts to go away. So like it's dramatic symptom changes with diet alone. And the diet is not going to cure us, but it helps to make these infections a lot less active. The inflammation starts to go down, and then we have to treat them, right? And that is the solution. The solution is really taking a different path. And that's what I did, luckily, over 30 years ago. My neurologist gave me no hope. He told me that I would be completely disabled. He warned me not to follow snake oil cures. And he said there was nothing that I could do to change the course of my life. I'm going to just head back. I think that was the last slide that I had for you. Yes. I'm going to head back over here so that... So I was told that there was nothing that I could do, that I would be completely disabled in time. And I was devastated at first, but then I picked myself up and I cried out to God for an answer. I begged him, and he's answered a lot of my prayers, not because I'm special, but I do a lot of begging. And he gave me the answer. My mother-in-law gave me a book on integrative health. That book talked about how infections, especially in the intestines, in the gut, yes, they have moved out throughout the body, organs, central nervous system, but the biggest base camp is in the intestines. And as you treat those infections, then you get a lot of recovery. The disease process will stop and you'll have a lot of recovery, more recovery than you thought possible. And that's what helped me to get my health and my life back. And since then, I've had another child. Now I have 5 grandchildren, and I've had the amazing privilege to coach over 1,000 students in helping them to recover from not just MS, but other chronic diseases. All chronic diseases are infections. There's dysbiosis. And unfortunately, it's not always the same infections in specific diseases. But that's what it is. And at least it's clear now. And some of the treatments that we use, they have antibacterial, but they could also have antiviral properties. So if there is a virus that's a little more active, but we don't focus on the viruses because they're so small. They are smaller than bacteria, than fungi, than all the worms and the protists. And so when you treat the big culprits, then things like viruses, your immune system is going to deal just like the general population, like everyone else. So some people get viruses and they're asymptomatic, and that is the key. So I'm just going to go to a couple of questions that you have here. I'd love to know what you think. Hi, Maureen. It's so nice to see you too. And Joanne, you've had cellulitis. So anything that's itis means inflammation, and that means infection, just so that you know. Since you were 4 months, you've had it twice in 4 months. And what causes this? Again, it is infection. And the old days where you think, well, I'll just take an antibiotic and I'll treat this infection and I'll be all better, that doesn't work for these chronic conditions. So it's all the same. Follow a low-carb diet because all these critters love carbs. So start to improve your diet. Lots of nutrition, but low carb. They don't really like fat as much. And then supporting the body, and then getting energy tested to see which treatments you need to treat the infection. So it could be something more so in the intestines. That's the base camp of the problem. But very often these infections will move into joints. It'll move into your bloodstream, can cause edema, can cause all kinds of issues. So it is infection. Anything with itis is inflammation, and inflammation in chronic disease is always caused by infection. Inflammation, otherwise, if you get in a car accident, that's a type of inflammation, but that's like physical injury. You're very welcome, Autumn. So surely that one person who got MS before becoming Epstein-Barr positive disproves that's the truth. But again, Louise, that is such a small sample size. That they're bragging about this on Forbes and the MS Society, and everybody's like, this is a consensus. It's pathetic, in my view. It's really pathetic. It's not a consensus. It's a very small, little study. And you can't, even for us to extrapolate like one person did in 97, it's like, sure, that's what in that small sample size, but is that even an accurate sample size? If they had 800 people, why didn't they work with a bigger, and that even would be a small, you'd have to have multiple studies with thousands of people to prove anything. Hi, Margaret. Hi, Debbie. So at best, having the Epstein-Barr virus could be considered to be a risk factor for getting MS, but not the actual cause. So they're not saying that it could be the cause. They're thinking that it could possibly be a trigger. And I'm saying that their conclusion for thinking it could be a trigger, it's not supported by their study. And there was another thing in their study where they found there's a marker that they look at, and if the marker is a little bit higher, they see this in where nerves are being damaged. And again, they found this after the Epstein-Barr. But remember that when people have significant infections with Epstein-Barr, they're also in a state of dysbiosis, right? And so this is where we have, because let's put it this way, if MS was triggered by Epstein-Barr virus and 95% of the population has had Epstein-Barr virus, would we not see a lot more MS, multiple sclerosis, if 95% of the population has had Epstein-Barr virus? So that is the key. It's just something that everybody gets, and they're trying to pin it on MS, and maybe there is something that it triggers, but it's not proven in the study. It really is not in my view. And actually, it's a stretch. It's a really big stretch. How could you find out if you have parasites? Kimberly's wondering. I've done some videos on this, and there are very specific symptoms for parasites, and there's very specific symptoms for fungal infections and for the Lyme infections. So things like a lot of gut issues, but again, that can overlap with other infections, backache. There's just a whole list, and I don't want to go into it right now, but I have done videos, and you can look on Live Disease Free YouTube, and you can look at symptoms of parasites there for sure. And unfortunately, there aren't good tests, Kimberly, for parasites. That's the problem. So you can get a comprehensive stool test. You can spend a lot of money. You can do DNA tests. And you might find some fungus, like maybe Candida, for example. They might pick up some small single-cell protists, but that's about it. They usually miss the parasites, and they're not going to pick up any parasites that are in your blood, your organs, or in your central nervous system. So what we do is we just go by symptoms, we go by health history, we go by diagnosis, and then our students get ready to treat, and then they are energy tested to see which of the common parasite drugs are most helpful for what they're dealing with. So instead of trying to figure out which infections they have, what they're doing is they're doing it in reverse. They're going, okay, which treatments will help me to restore balance? Which ones are testing well for me? So then you can look at the treatments that test well for you and say, well, this treatment treats roundworms and tapeworms, so I probably have those. This one treats more giardia and etc., so I maybe that's what I have. But the nice thing is these treatments, there's a lot of overlap, so they won't just usually treat one type of parasite. And a parasite is anything that lives inside of you and causes you harm. So it's not just fungus or worms. Like people think parasites are worms. They're not just worms. It's fungus, it's Lyme infections, bacteria, and protists, single-cell parasites. A couple more questions and then we will go here. So Joanne, you've never had mono. Neither did I, right? And I was diagnosed with MS and I never had mono either. So Louise, yes, certain infections, particularly viruses, can block the vitamin D receptors on our cells, making us deficient. But it's not just viruses. I haven't seen the research about viruses, but I for sure know that things like Borrelia really like vitamin D and will make us deficient. And then there's other ones like Candida and other parasites can make us anemic, low blood iron. And so they can make us deficient in various things. Hi, James. You were diagnosed with Epstein-Barr virus in the 1990s. I'm not sure if you were also diagnosed with multiple sclerosis before or after that. Debbie, you've had mono when you were 22 years old. Interesting. And James also had diagnosis with Lyme disease, same year with Epstein-Barr virus. So that's James, so the same person. And definitely we know that the Borrelia, the co-infections can cause the symptoms of MS, and it's really common. So Lyme disease definitely can, but again, we don't focus on treating Lyme because if you've got the bigger worms and you focus on viruses and Lyme, you'll have to focus, and even with fungus, if you focus on the smaller problem and you don't deal with the bigger problem, then you'll just keep being reinfected because some of the worms, they actually carry Lyme disease. And we know that the central nervous system is not a sterile environment. We know that there's all kinds of microbes that live in the central nervous system. And so we don't want to be taking these disease-modifying drugs that block our immune cells out of our central nervous system because we will be susceptible to not just the viruses and worms, et cetera, but cancer and other issues. So your MS specialist said to take 4,000 international units of vitamin D. That should be fine, Joanne. What is the connection between having a leaky gut? So when you have parasites in your intestines, they will cause inflammation and leaky gut. And then different, food particles that shouldn't go through and other toxins from the infections will go through and will cause inflammation, immune. And so then these parasites can travel through the blood, cross the blood-brain barrier. And actually, I've shared some other previous videos about how certain infections in your intestines can cause, and this is current research, the state of dysbiosis. Some of these microbes will cause not just leaky gut, but leaky brain, allowing these infections to cross the blood-brain barrier and toxins to cross the blood-brain barrier more easily. So this is where we need to be. We need to be looking at the whole picture, not just the very smallest microbe that could possibly be a problem. Vitamins are very important. Listen to your body. And as far as vitamins, the right vitamins, right? Just basic plant source nutrition from your food first, and then a little bit of extra to fill in what's missing from your diet, especially if you don't have a garden and you're not getting vine-ripened fruits and vegetables. So are MS and Lyme disease closely related? So MS, in my humble opinion, through my own experience and working with many, many people, and when people recover when treating infections, then this is what we found, is that MS is caused by infections. And when you figure out which infections they are, you can become symptom-free. And we can have a lot more recovery than we thought possible if we treat effectively. But treating is not like the good old days where you just pop an antibiotic and you get rid of your strep throat or tonsillitis or bronchitis. Treating involves stop feeding the infections, feed your body, support your body in various ways. That's the prep phase. And then when you're treating, it requires, what we have found is that it requires parasite drugs, herbs, and oxidizing agents to really help us to get into the central nervous system. Most of the problem is still in the intestines, but when we have chronic disease, it's moved, especially neurological diseases, it's moved into the central nervous system. So you're wondering how to register for my program. So what I'll do is we will post a link to listen to my masterclass training to really understand the steps we take. You'll hear about a whole bunch of case studies, and then you can join the Live Disease Free program, and that is what we use to help people recover. And you can see some of their successes on our YouTube channel, Live Disease Free, but also on our website, livediseasefree.com. And you can hear amazing stories. Get your Kleenex ready because you'll probably feel like crying because the stories, the successes are so incredibly wonderful. And what I've really noticed in the last few months is that I have a lot more healthcare professionals taking our program, which is really exciting. So not just, we've had a lot of nurses in the past that have MS that take the programming and recover, but now we're having more doctors join that have MS, which is crazy because I'm not a healthcare professional. I'm just a teacher, right? And so we have a system that's getting more and more attention, and we're so excited because the more healthcare professionals that use this approach and recover, then they are going to help more people. And I want this out of my hands. Sure, will be available to help, people follow to doing the things they can do, diet and lifestyle and all of those things, the prep phase and building a healthy lifestyle and all those other steps. But the treatment part is, we would just be so thrilled if there were more and more doctors that were skilled and they really understood how to help their patients to identify and to treat the parasitic infestation that they're dealing with. So we're seeing a shift, and I don't know if it's because of what we've been going through for the last 2 years, where there are some practitioners that have had to step away from their practice because they didn't get the, what we've been dealing with, and so they're really disillusioned with the system, and so they're wanting to incorporate more of a holistic approach. But just so you know, I am going to pull this video because I've talked about a few things that can get me into trouble. It's ridiculous, but we will be posting it. We'll let you guys know. If you want to stay in touch with us, make sure to go onto our website, livediseasefree.com, and you can opt in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing a newsletter where I can just kind of summarize so you guys know what research I'm doing and what solutions and what we're finding. So that you can just kind of pick and choose what you want to listen to. But we need to be connected. We really do. So I'm going to let you guys go because we've gone on quite a bit. There's quite a few more questions. Type your questions in the question box. We will answer them. So this video is a little too spicy, a little too in-depth to stay here. And as far as I know, we'll be putting it up on our website or on a different website, but I'm going to have to start doing something different because I want to share more truthful things, and I'm very limited with what I can say here. Yeah, newsletter is a great idea. Way to go. So just type your questions in, we'll answer them. And please like and share and subscribe. So I guess liking this, but subscribe for sure to the Live Disease Free YouTube channel if you'd like to get more videos like this. So take care and bye-bye for now.